My name is Jafik Kadakia, and my project is Debate in Diplomacy, President Nixon's Trip to China. Welcome to the Nixon Foundation Library. My name is Henry Kissinger, and I served as the Secretary of State under the Nixon administration. While I may be 98, I still remember my late old buddy, Richard Nixon, who was a truly influential and unique president. Before his resignation, he was able to make several accomplishments, including the establishment of the Environmental Protection Agency, the Apollo program, and much more. But one of his most important accomplishments was the détente between China and the United States. China was the rising communist superpower. After the Chinese Civil War, the Communist Party of China took control in 1949. The United States and China severed ties with each other. The People's Republic, much like modern-day North Korea, maintained a strict anti-Western policy, and much of the nation's information was kept inside rather than shared with the rest of the world. Richard Nixon won the Republican nomination for president for the second time after losing the election in 1960. He campaigned on the Vietnam War, particularly on ending it, restoring peace to the United States and Vietnam, and bringing American troops home. He won against Democratic nominee Hubert Humphrey. Shortly after being elected, he started focusing on China, but his interests were not publicly shared and were kept inside his inner circle. President Nixon first told me he wanted to open relations with China in early 1969. I was shocked, surprised, and dumbfounded. I told my aide Alexander Haig, "Our leader has taken leave of reality." To me, opening relations with China was like playing with fire. This all ended on April 10th, 1971. China had made a return to the World Table Tennis Championship, and the United States was set to play against them. So, on April 10th, 1971, the 15-people delegation stepped into China from Hong Kong and were met by Premier Chu Enlai, Chinese officials, and the Chinese ping pong table tennis team. For the first time since the communist takeover, Americans were allowed into the country. This began ping pong diplomacy. For the next year, both nations shared ideas about strengthening and starting the diplomacy, and both leaders bounced ideas off each other without actually doing anything. During President Nixon's first term, he sent me over on a secret diplomatic mission to Beijing to meet with Premier Enlai. The trip was deemed a success. So, on July 15, 1971, President Nixon made a public broadcast over NBC News that he'd be visiting the People's Republic of China for 1 week in 1972. He called China a vital partner needed for the growth of both nations. He spoke the following: "Our action in seeking a new relation is not at the expense of our friends. We seek friendly relations with all nations. Any nation can be our friend without being another nation's enemy." RN prepared for his trip, but so did the rest of the world. Americans were afraid of China, the Soviet Union, and several other uprising communist superpowers. Fear of war, the end of the world, nuclear disaster was rising. Americans were afraid that if RN were to visit China, it'd make matters much worse. The debate behind his trip was continued in Congress. He was able to win approval of his trip, but not without a fight. Several conservatives were afraid that if RN were to visit China, it would conflict with sanctions in Taiwan, as America was pulling troops out. You see, Taiwan was a democracy unlike China, and they believed if Richard Nixon were to visit China, it would support their unlawful claim over Taiwan. But President Nixon decided to put the historical diplomacy over the debate and controversy. So, on February 21st, 1972, at around 11:30 a.m., President Nixon arrived in Peking, China, where he was met by Premier Chu Enlai and several other Chinese officials. The next days were filled with roundtables and discussions. President Nixon sat in a 4-hour roundtable discussion with Premier Chu Enlai, where they talked about several items, including the Indo-Chinese War, the Soviet Union, Taiwan, and the most important part of President Nixon's trip, the Shanghai Communique. While President Nixon was in talks and discussions, First Lady Pat Nixon did most of the sightseeing and tours. This included local visits to hospitals, schools, and recreational activities. She also got the chance to meet some of China's most famous pandas, and China, as a gift, gave some to the United States. But President Nixon also decided to join in on this fun. So on February 27, 1972, President Nixon, along with First Lady Pat Nixon and Premier Chu Enlai, visited the Great Wall of China. On the last day of President Nixon's trip, February 28th, he and Premier Chu Enlai released a joint communique, the Shanghai Communique. This historic document stated that the People's Republic of China and the United States will work together to keep the diplomacy between them alive. It stated how they would achieve this, as well as expanding the economic and cultural contacts between them. It was the prelude to opening relations between the two. They hoped gain more leverage with the Soviet Union and strengthen the Sino-American relationship. President Nixon returned to D.C. the next day, but the work did not stop there. In 1979, the United States and China established full diplomatic relations with each other. President Nixon's trip was an overall success, as he was the first sitting U.S. president to visit China. He did face a few failures, though, after coming back. These included not being able to calm down the already heated situation between China and the Soviet Union, along with the situations going on in Taiwan, Korea, and Vietnam, especially with the Cold War going on. President Nixon also faced consequences, but these were relatively small and majority came from Congress, who demanded answers on the future of Sino-American relations and Taiwan. Today, China and the United States relationship is one that is valued and respected all across the globe because it shows that cultural and government differences don't matter in diplomacy. President Nixon spoke at the Great Banquet. What we have said in that communique is not nearly as important as what we will do in the years ahead to build a bridge across 16,000 miles in 22 years of hostility which has divided us in the past. Today, only a part of that bridge has been complete, but with more to come soon. In recent years, the United States and China have stopped several economic trade deals with each other due to worsening relations. While the United States and China's relationship is much better than before, it's not as well as it can be achieved. Several tensions from economic and political reform movements have stopped several diplomatic moves. Nuclear power expansion and the question of the status of Hong Kong, Taiwan, and human rights situations in China have conflicted with ties. Both countries have successfully avoided military conflicts with each other through negotiations. Every president after Nixon has followed the custom of visiting the People's Republic of China. Nixon, Reagan, Carter, Bush Sr. and Jr., Obama, and Trump have all visited the People's Republic of China for state visits to expand relations with each other. Today, the United States and China have one of the largest trade deals with each other. In 2020, estimated trade amounts with the United States and China were about $650.2 billion. 13.8% of all trade for the United States is done with China. And China is the largest importer for the United States. President Nixon's trip showed the world that despite governance differences, diplomacy can be alive. Despite the debate, controversy, and failures in President Nixon's trip, He was able to make it a huge diplomatic success, and it is a true example of debate and diplomacy in history. Thank you.